Hello, everyone. This is Joe Atwill with Jan Irvin. This is another episode of UnSpun after taking a week hiatus because of illness and travel concerns. And we're back today we're going to be talking about the Woodstock Rock Festival. That was such a cultural debasing event, and we're going to actually be producing what I think is some brand new facts about it, exposing the origin of the event, what the public was told about how the organizers selected the venue, and what exactly they had in mind turns out to be untrue. In fact, there was a prior music festival series that had been held at Woodstock, which we will show is directly related to Aleister Crowley. Crowley, of course, is a peculiar Freemason. He called himself the 666 Beast. He was very influential with rock and roll performers. John Lennon claimed that the whole basis of the Beatles was to promote the concept of do what thou wiltst. Do what thou wiltst is going to be something we're going to talk quite a bit about tonight. It comes from Aleister Crowley. Lennon was actually quoting, even using the Old English form of thou wilt, when he described the basis of the Beatles' philosophy. And it turns out that the music festival that Woodstock was actually descended from also had Crowley's expression, do what thou wiltst, as its creed. And so what we're going to do today is to take the listener on a journey of fact and logic to show that there was a generational program that had the cultural debasement of Woodstock in mind, and that we actually now have some very good both fact and logic to be able to expose, how they did it and what was the purpose of it, and how all of these things were brought together. So Jan, the first step I think someone has to take is to understand the Maverick music.
Well, before we start with the Maverick,
Yeah.
I'm here in New York now. I've been here for the last week doing research, so couldn't make last week's episode because of, I had landed and was still probably sitting on the airplane when the show would have gone live. But, you brought up the Maverick Music Festival, and that actually comes from an art colony called the Birdcliff Art Colony that I went and traveled to, and I'll be showing some of the photographs of that. But basically, and maybe I should just start that up now so that everyone can begin to see the photos and things that we've got for this. But this Maverick Film Festival, let's see if I can find it here.
Music Festival.
This Maverick Music Festival starts with this organization called the Woodstock Birdcliff Art Colony, and this is the guild here. And we'll notice that on the front window of the Birdcliff Guild, it says right here in the text here, it all starts here, or it all started here, excuse me. And so this is actually where it all started. So the Maverick and that this is where the Maverick Music Festival was held. This is the Maverick building, and this was a music festival put on by the Bird Cliff Colony. Now, Maverick, and Joe, you brought this up earlier. It pertains to the four horsemen and the Book of Revelation.
Right.
And we can see right here on the front of this building that, well, right here is a piece of art, and if we zoom in on it, there is a horse or a unicorn, looks kind of like a black horse or something. Maybe it's a black goat, I'm not sure, but right there on the front of this building is a horse type looking animal. It's aged, it's hard to tell for sure what it is. I think that's a crack in the wood up there at the top. But this is right on the outside of the building, and showing its relation to the Book of Revelation and this sort of this connection. So traveling from Woodstock, it's just a couple of minutes from Woodstock, and you arrive at this place called the Bird Cliff Art Colony, and it says right on the sign outside as you enter the area that it was an experiment in utopian living. So this goes way back, and this talks about Whitehead in 1902. So we're talking about 114 years ago is when they started doing these types of experiments that became Woodstock. And so when we get up into this colony, hopefully I've got them lined up. This is basically what the colony, I'm going to zoom out here a little bit, what the colony looks like on the map. They had all these buildings, a few roads going around this little colony. But the colony was founded by this man. Let's see if I can get to it here. Ralph Whitehead. And I got to find a place where it's going to zoom in properly. And then Jane Whitehead was his wife. So these are the two that started this colony. And if I think it's his background, but he was like an Iowa farm boy, and suddenly he gets a scholarship to Harvard, and then he starts this art colony that becomes the foundation of and it's related to one of the first communes in existence, and that's created by these two. So when we get into the Bird Cliff, this is the Bird Cliff Theater here, and this is just across the street. It was about, I don't know, I think it was 4 degrees or 3 degrees, something like that when I took these photos. It was pretty cold. It's been really cold. Right now we just had a heat wave, so it was about 50 a little bit ago. But are you still there?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So, and we can see right here, this is Whitehead Road. And so this is the art colony. There's the theater in the background. And here's, another building from the colony there. Yeah, these art displays. This one is like your corporate ladder, and it's like this whirlwind. Never mind that they're creating a neo-feudalistic system to destroy society and to debase society. But this art display there, and we found this funny. Somebody crossed out, "This isn't fun anymore," and put "Woodstock isn't fun anymore." And that about sums it up. It's good to see other people waking up and realizing what's going on with all of this. And then here was an ironic sign inside this same barn: "Hopes and dreams lost and found." So, it's, no doubt that lots of dreams have been lost because of this group. And this was their, what was the building here? Just Bird Cliff Barn, whatever that means. They used it for art and things like that. There was a kelm, and you can see a painting easel right there at the front. But this is the Bird Cliff Art Colony, and so this is essentially where Woodstock begins, long before Woodstock. We're talking, well, from 1902, so what was Woodstock? August 67, I believe.
The music festival started in 1917. They had their colony was in existence for a number of years, and then the music festival.
Okay, so then it's exactly 50 years later on the sesquicentennial.
Yep, that's right. And what's interesting, and I think Jan is going to show photographs from the collection from the Maverick archives, is you'll see that at these music festivals, there was a particular kind of dress that people would maintain. Now, if you look at this, you can see the devil here. The individual in the center is the devil, but all around him you have feudal people from either magic or the feudal system, right? But you'll see that there's a difference between these individuals' garb and the clothes that were worn by the rock and roll stars. There's one key difference. The rock and roll stars, when you go to Woodstock in '69, they would be having archaic revival in combination with this appearance. In other words, you'd see buckskin fringe and cowboy appearance and Indian clothes, the American Indian.
Right.
That comes from Gregory Bateson, who discovered the power that embracing the past had in terms of making people docile. And so what you have here is sort of a nascent culturally destructive force. This was the ideas that were in vogue among this organization at this time. And they are really representing this do what thou wilt. In other words, what they're trying to get people to do is to sort of break away from what has become civilization and embrace all of their emotions that have been sublimated and controlled, and there had been delayed gratification before, and just accept the idea of do what thou wilt. So this is a really strange concept. In other words, it is a concept that just makes no sense culturally, but it was the creed of the Maverick colony, the colony that put on the music festivals. And so this was fascinating, because if you look at the explanation as to why Woodstock had been chosen by the people who put on the '69 concert, they claim all sorts of explanations, but they don't ever mention that it was actually basically the latest iteration of these performances that had taken place in the teens and in the 20s. And what's really important is, and the way that you can see that there is, people are lying, is that you have such a strong connection between just the creed that they professed of do what thou wilt in the Maverick Art Colony, and what was going on with the rock and roll stars. I mean, remember, John Lennon said that was the whole basis of the Beatle philosophy. But what really seals the deal, what really, creates a kind of evidentiary solidity, is the fact that Aleister Crowley had been a hermit in this exact region at the exact...
Right. He was about 15 minutes west of Woodstock on an island in the Hudson River.
Right. The Hudson River cuts right through here, right next to Woodstock. Crowley had bivouacked as a hermit on one of these islands, and he put up a sign so that the passing boats could see it, and it had the statement, do what thou wilt. So this was what was going on with the Maverick Art Colony, which is...
Sure, and it would be interesting to find out who directly connected there was... who directly connected there was associated with Crowley.
Yeah, in other words, we don't have that link yet. We'll get it, but we can assure you that it's just not circumstantially possible, given how unusual the expression is, and particularly going back to 1917. I mean, this is just revolutionary beyond all imagination. And the idea that Crowley would be at the same place as the art colony professing the same idea at the same time, circumstantially, is just, I mean, good luck
Now,
in that case.
There's some more history about this that needs to be explained, because Woodstock actually has nothing to do with Woodstock other than the Bird Cliff Art Colony and the Maverick Music Festival. Now, Woodstock, the concert, was actually held in a town that's an hour and a half drive from Woodstock. So, I mean, you're talking, 68 miles minimum, with windy, small country roads going through New York to get to this little Jewish town called Bethel. And the name Bethel means house of God.
Right.
So the Woodstock quote-unquote concert wasn't associated in Woodstock at all. It was an hour and a half away, which is quite a distance. I mean, it's a good long drive over there. And the concert was held in the quote-unquote house of God. And so, it's, when you think of Crowley and all of this stuff, there's probably a lot more connections there. But I'm going to show some of the photos, hopefully, here that I have taken of the Bethel area and going into it. Let's see if I can get this going here properly. I'm on my laptop, so please excuse my not being used to this computer here. So, all right, so let's see. All right, well, you know what I should do is first I should start out with this town called the village of Saugerties, and this is the town that the original Woodstock concert was supposed to be held, and where Woodstock 94 was actually held. So this is Saugerties, New York. You can see the town, entering the town there, Oddfellows Temple. You can see this sign here is one of the original places that they met during the Revolution and signed articles of association here. So this town, Saugerties, is sort of historically important. They've got their own Knights of Columbus place there. Lots of good stuff. But this is the actual location of the 94 Woodstock. And again, this is where the 67 Woodstock was originally supposed to be held. So lots of posted no trespassing signs. So I whizzed in and out of there as quickly as I could to get some photos of the area and get out of there before anybody with guns or cop lights came pulling up. So this is the location of the 94 show here. And again, the original location where the first Woodstock was supposed to be held. And interestingly, it's held at Augusta Savage Road in Saugerties. So let's see. Now, there's a couple of other things here that are kind of mixed in. I might as well touch on these. They're actually building a new music school here in Woodstock to carry on all of this big, this huge MKUltra operation. But this is the location. It looks like a former high school or junior high, and they're reappropriating it. Nobody's reproducing in this area to warrant having a high school. So they're putting in this rock music school here. Even the fire department locally has, that's the local fire department's logo, burning guitars. And anyway, so there's a Maverick building there. So here we are going into the town of Bethel. We can see town of Bethel here. And this was about, 1 or 4 degrees outside, just holding the camera out to take photographs. You can only hold your hand out for about 30 seconds without it starting to hurt. But this is just entering the town here, some pretty view. You can see this beautiful frozen lake here. And it's definitely quite a large lake. And then you roll up to Bethel Woods. Now, this is an interesting sign because what we see here is on the right there, you have the Pied Piper. And of course, the Pied Piper is very symbolic. And, anyway, so you roll into this. It wasn't like this back in the 60s when they held the concert here. It was just a farmer's field. But they've turned it into this big art center. And Michael Lang, in fact, this week, the man who put on both the 67 and the 94 Woodstock, has announced that he's either going to do a new Woodstock up in the next coming years or do an annual Woodstock. So, and he even mentions in the article that Woodstock is a brand. But again, Bethel Woods, where this location for the Woodstock concert happened, is 68 miles at least from Woodstock. It has nothing to do with Woodstock other than being associated with the Bird Cliff and the Maverick concert thing. So, interestingly, and of course it's spelled differently, but the Bethel Woods Art Center is held off of Herd Road. So maybe just a little irony there. I mean, of course it's not H-E-R-D, but it's still Herd Road. And then, so this is the actual one of the fields here that they claim had 400,000 people on it. You can see a big peace sign there. There is the frozen lake in the background, so I think they had the location a lot more spread out. It was hard to figure out, I'd have to go through and look at the stage photos, compare them to the hills, etc. So this is the original location for the 67 Woodstock.
It was 69, yeah.
Or 69, excuse me. Thank you. And, and this is what it looks like at about 0 degrees outside. So, as it says, Woodstock Festival Monument, August 69. Over 400,000 people came together at this place to participate. And now I'm forgetting the original farmer's name. What was the farmer's name?
Yager.
What was it?
Max Yager.
Max Yager, okay. And interestingly, they have the Pied Piper all around here, and then the other side of the sign says, "Sunlight harvested here." I found that interesting. Not quite sure the under meaning there, but just something to consider. And then here's their monument to the Woodstock Festival, and this one was erected by the later owners in '84, Louis, Nicky, and June Galish, for the festival, and we can see, who all played there. And we have Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix and The Who and Grateful Dead, etc., that we've already exposed, Crosby, Stills, Nash, on and on. But, this is just, showing you the location. This is what they did, was they've actually even put in this sort of museum center here at Woodstock now. It's a big, they've turned it into a tourist attraction and arts center, etc., so that they can market all of this stuff. But it's definitely a marketing ploy. And here's, the whole thing, a better shot of it anyway. But that's where Woodstock, the concert, was held, in this little Jewish town, Bethel. An hour and a half drive minimum from Woodstock. So, coming in, here's Woodstock. I don't know if that's the end of it, but it looks like the end of it. I do have some photos of Woodstock going into the town here, which I wanted to show quickly. Just, this is downtown Woodstock, your typical head shop. You've got your typical clothing stores, and it's all selling the town theme. The town, except for outside money, is totally broke. It's pretty dysfunctional. You can see the hippie paintings and stuff everywhere. And walking downtown in front of the local small bookstore, there was this book sitting in the window, which I thought was very interesting. It's David Bowie using the Illuminati one eye, and of course, The Man Who Sold the World is the title of it, ironically. And anyways, so as we see the sign on the side of the building here, Bethel, 68 miles. So Woodstock is quite the distance. Now, you'll notice right under this Bethel sign, it says back to the garden. It's, they're actually, saying more of an idea of neo-feudalism than anything.
Right, and that's, of course, the Joni Mitchell song, We've Got to Get Back to the Garden, and Joni performed there at Woodstock 69.
Now, this is just more of the downtown area, and, you can get your tie-dyes and your psychic readings and your evil-looking Jimi Hendrix album cover and your fudge brownies, and you can inhabit your divinity, silent spiritual practice, learn remembrance, all this kind of stuff. I mean, they sell the whole thing.
Well, you can see what a strong and positive cultural influence the Woodstock concert was when you...
Right, yeah. I mean, this is just a thriving, booming town where, it's so wrapped up in communism and everything is commune, community, this, that. But the town, the economy is just completely stifled out. Here's one of the buildings where people used to play. You've got the Woodstock Film Festival across the street. In fact, maybe we should submit this maybe I'll make a documentary of all this and see if we can submit it to the Woodstock Film Festival and win the Woodstock Film Festival Award for exposing Woodstock.
I think the grand prize is they will let us play on stage one of the rock and roll songs from the Grateful Dead.
Now, one thing that I want to mention here is that above the town, up in the, I guess they call these mountains here, they're hills to us Californians, but what they've done is they've put this large Buddhist retreat center up in the mountains, and there's a massive overlap between and in fact, there's a book in the other room that exposes the merger of Buddhism and the psychedelics and all of this as part of the agenda. But up on the hill, they've got this center that, of course, sells the whole agenda. Just kind of a pretty photo there. And then right next to it, interestingly, is this little tiny Orthodox church. And so just to put it in perspective for everybody, and here's the sign. Okay, so it's the Holy Transfiguration of Christ on the Mount, but it's this little tiny wooden old church, Orthodox Christian church. And so there's the size comparison of what's going on in the town and what they're actually selling. So that's just one wing of the Buddhist Center next to the entire building. And they, of course, they put it right next to this Orthodox church. And then, let's see, I guess that thing was appropriated. Church of Holy Transfiguration been placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 2005. So anyway, that's, most of it. This is, one of the main cities through the town, Rock City, and then back to the Maverick Center. So that pretty much sums up, the photograph overview.
Okay, that's the current situation, and that gives people a good understanding of what happened in '69. Are you able to put on screen the archived photographs from the 1917 through 31 music festivals? Because I think those are really important for people to see.
Put up what again? I'm sorry.
Put up the photographs that are on from that website that has archived photographs.
Sure.
Yeah, because
I
wanted to show everyone, you can see how amazing the parallels are to the 69 performance and the appearance of the individuals. And yeah, there's a whole series of these. You can see, okay, this is great. Here they are. All right. So here is now let's just go through. You can see that they're wearing these kind of clown outfits. This is the Do What Thou Wilt. This was a cubist. This is kind of helping people to. Now, here, as you can see, this is more of.
These are the original Deadheads, basically. So
now look at this.
Now we can look and see where Sue Palakis got her ideas from, basically.
And you can really see the merry pranksters who didn't have as much of the Indian archaic revival influence as was in Laurel Canyon. You can see that these guys really are, as you go through them, you can see that these people could have easily just walked right out into Woodstock '69.
Right. And they would have fit right into.
Fit right in. And so this was this is amazing. Here are the pranksters. And look at their garb and then go back. I mean, this is amazing. And now go back and look at the archive photographs and then just keep going through these because there's quite a few of them. I wanted to.
Let's probably go the other direction, but yeah.
Now look at imagine if these guys had got on the prankster bus, they would have just been welcomed with open arms. I mean, they're just, so if you go back, you'll see that there's just one after another of the, trying to dress up. Now look at these two. Now here again, this is a devil with some kind of a fairy person. This is Aleister Crowley's influence. This is why the creed, the actual creed. Look at this collection with the devil horn on the individual. The creed was from Aleister Crowley. That do what thou willst. This is all foreshadowing what will eventually.
Then you can see the transgender cross-dressing stuff going on here, etc.
Yeah, exactly. So this was the festival that had reflected Crowley's basically.
I want you to live in tree houses, basically.
Right, and that this was the festival that had reflected Crowley's project. That's the Ark Royale, which was burned at the end of the event. Very interesting, just as like the burning of the items at the Burning Man or also at Bohemian Grove. So they had this, they would construct large wooden devices and then burn them, with the outdoor music. And so this was the tradition from which the organizers of the Woodstock Festival were drawing from. This was what they had in mind, is they had in mind that they could put on this on a grand scale with psychedelic drugs to create the most debased influence on as many people as possible. It was really what ties this all together, and that's Harvey White. He was the organizer of the music festival. Yeah, Harvey White. So anyway, you're going to once now that Woodstock has the origins of it has been exposed, and this.
Well, there's probably more before you say that, Joe.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So, let's get into the next part here because some of the background on Woodstock is, we have Joel Rosenman and Michael Lang and Artie Kornfeld, these three Jewish businessmen who put on the Woodstock concert. They put it on in actual Bethel, New York, which is a Jewish town here. That's where the actual festival was held. But all of this, if we start following this stuff up, now we talked about communes earlier with the Birdcliff colony, etc. So the original colony, essentially, that feeds into all of this is going to be this Hull House. And this Hull House is based off of the Brave New World and taking, other ideas, taking all of this stuff, putting it together. But it comes out of the settlement movements. And we see these, and we see Harvey, oops, I have that spelled wrong. Harvey White shows up right there. Oops, I clicked the wrong one. But he actually comes out of this Hull House. And here's change the spelling. So here we have Harvey White. And he comes out, his influence comes out of this this Hull House and this whole organization. And then it was him and not Whitehead, I guess, that was trained at Harvard University. And he was influenced by R.R. Whitehead. And so this whole house, obviously Herbie White, Harvard University. I mean, we got Tim Leary and Henry A. Murray, all kinds of MKUltra folks come out of Harvard. It's a loose association there, but I just thought I'd mention it. But going back to this whole house, it was heavily influenced by, well, as was Herbie White, communism and the whole communist agenda. But it was influenced by this settlement movement.
I just want to interject something. I mean, what you're talking about here are the utopian ideas, and it's important for people to understand what was in back of most of these utopian concepts in communes.
Right. Well, and it gets better because, Joe, this settlement movement comes out of, well, it ties to the settlement movement of Russia. And these guys, Stanislav Shotsky and Alexander Zelenko, starting a communist settlement movement in Russia that was actually shut down by the Russian government for promoting communist propaganda. And it was allowed to thrive in the U.S. here in this direct area of New York.
Right. What I was going to say is that people need to look at these communal kind of efforts, the utopian concepts, in the perspective of Crowley, of do what thou wilt, because what's being sold to the public, even with the word utopia, is that you'll have a world where you can do what you want. There's no restriction. There's no delayed gratification. Do what thou wilt. That's what luring people into these utopian ideas, and that's what's being sold at the
right, and it's being sold as freedom when it's actually the ultimate slavery.
Right, exactly, because the more intellectually debased you are, the more likely you are to be a slave, and all of these utopian worlds are intellectually debased worlds. Your thinking goes out the window, your ability to, and of course, family production and ethnic pride and things that the oligarchs might be frightened of. These things are all just crushed in the commune, the production of the communal man, which is just basically a sex addict, drug addict, and someone who is gullible to any kind of sophistry that comes down the pike because he has no training in logic or reason.
Right. So there's more to this story here with this settlement movement. Now, the settlement movement comes, people can study the University Settlement Society of New York, and that ties into all of this and kind of gives a history of it and then, who was behind it, etc. But there's an interesting connection here is this ties right into the progressive era. And so the progressive era creates several things, including scientific management or Taylorism. So this is actually a form of large business, social control, etc. So it's actually, social control using scientific management systems.
Incidentally, Taylorism was one of the basis of the science that Trist of the Tavistock Institute developed. He developed his social technology skills. He had a name for it, which I can't recall right now, but it was basically that. But it came right out of Taylorism. So this is a great connection because then his son becomes the manager of the Grateful Dead, and now we're full circle. We're on the stage at Woodstock with the Grateful Dead playing. And
absolutely. Yeah. All right, so this progressive era, now, interestingly, the big people behind it, now, people think that being so, rah-rah Woodstock, we're free, we're feral, we're uncontrolled, we're uneducated, we don't bathe, we're the type of place where, it's...
we're doing our own thing.
You're doing your own thing. It's a kind of place where people look at unbathed dogs as having mange, but unbathed humans are considered spiritual. And so the influence of this progressive era is Howard Taft, Teddy Roosevelt, and Woodrow Wilson. So this is actually coming down from on high. And so when people think that they're breaking away from it, they're actually under the guys or the guiding of the government. I mean, it appears that all of this is coming from the White House down. And so those who think they're retaliating and getting into all of this, they're actually falling into it.
And Taft was Skull and Bones, and here you have Theodore Roosevelt, he's a Freemason, and you just have nothing but these secret societies that are determined to have control over the culture and over the masses, and that's what people are succumbing to. These all of these things are being sold. Progressivism, socialism, utopianism, sex, drug, and rock and roll. I mean, these things are being sold, but in back of it, there's malfeasance. In back of it, they're just trying to take people away from the capacity to think clearly.
Absolutely, and and you can realize that when you look at this stuff, when you look at Eric Trist and the Tavistock Institute and the influence on the Grateful Dead, and Artie Lang over at Millbrook. Now, Millbrook is about 45 miles or so from Woodstock. I'm not sure how far it is from Bethel, but it's in Dutchess County. And of course, Timothy Leary, and Joe and I have covered this many times, Timothy Leary admitting that he was an agent, a witting agent from 62. I think he was recruited by at least 57 and doing studies at Harvard, such as the Harvard Psychedelic Research Project from about 57 on, testing different marketing names, as I revealed in my article, Entheogens, What's in a Name, behind all of that. But you have the Millbrook Mansion, which was, of course, owned by the Mellon banking family, Peggy Mellon Hitchcock's brother, Billy Mellon Hitchcock. And Peggy Mellon Hitchcock, of course, married Walter Boart, who wrote Operation Mind Control. And Walter Boart's book, Operation Mind Control, was basically the first book out discussing MK Ultra and all of this stuff going on. But he doesn't tell you that he's tied right into the center of the whole thing. Walter Boart's own in-laws were the owners of the Millbrook Mansion, which he never mentions in his book. And they were, the Mellon banking empire was a large part funding this, of course, as was J.P. Morgan, where Gordon Wasson, the so-called Discover Magic Mushrooms, worked as vice president of propaganda, as well as the Warburgs that owned Sandoz Pharmaceuticals, manufacturing the LSD. And then you have the mystic Rudolf Steiner encouraging Arthur Stoll to invent LSD. It may come as a shock to some of you to learn that Albert Hofmann very probably did not invent LSD unless he did it in 32 or 33 or before. Of course, the official version of the story is that he invented it in 38, didn't discover it until Bicycle Day in 43, which is a bunch of nonsense. But which I've exposed in a couple of my articles, such as Spies in Academic Clothing. But this Bicycle Day thing is all a cover story, because it appears that Arthur Stoll actually invented LSD sometime between 1918 and probably 1923, at the very latest 1932, and that they passed on the invention of LSD to Albert Hofmann to cover up 20 years of human experimentation that they were doing for this mystic Rudolf Steiner, and who of course was a big occultist. He founded the Waldorf schools here in the United States. But it's all tied into this occult intelligence network. One thing, going back to Do What Thou Wilt and the whole Crowley thing that we didn't mention earlier, and it appears strongly that Crowley was actually MI6. There's a couple of books out there, such as Secret Agent 666. And then Crowley also knew Aldous Huxley, etc. And we've shown repeatedly that Aldous Huxley was in charge of MK Ultra. And again, here, just like with David Bowie earlier with the one eye, we have Huxley showing the one eye.
Also, look at Keith Richards. His autobiography is out now, and he has the same photograph on it with his skull and bone ring.
Yeah.
prominent. I mean, these people are all just a collection of the secret society. You know, they're all lifetime actors. And just a couple connections I wanted to also mention. When you think about the Mellons, the Mellon banking family, and how influential they were both through Tim Leary and through the funding of the Grateful Dead, bear in mind that the Mellon family was basically the OSS during World War II. If you look in the archives of the OSS as to who had the leadership positions, man, they were all Mellons. The Mellon family had a complete lock control over the OSS. They were everywhere in it. So that's the first thing, is that then when the OSS transitions into the CIA and you end up with this MK Ultra business, you can see that you're connecting into oligarchic control that is very, very long standing. You know, one thing I wanted to mention is why it's important to understand that the Woodstock in '69 descended from these, do what thou wiltst music festivals in the 20s, is because, you know, culture moves very slowly, and individuals typically can't see culture move in their own lifetimes. It moves too slowly for people to have, to see dramatic changes. And that's why you have generational approaches. And that's why, for example, in Laurel Canyon, the rock and roll stars, so many of them were the sons and daughters of a prior generation of military intelligence. It's why you have this movement in the 20s that basically was studied, was understood. It had taken music, put it out into the countryside, and had associated it with debased cultural idea, do what thou wilt, which was the creed, communal living, and then of course the dress, the appearance, right, of this, kind of merry prankster look, and so as that then, that history existed, the people who came along to do Woodstock '69 were aware of all of this. They knew about this. They didn't look. They certainly had this understanding. They knew what had gone on there, and that's why they went back to this location. That's why. It's because it was basically just to continue with the effort that had been going on. It was giving an homage to this prior generation that had done all this cultural destruction, and now they were going to do the festival, but this time they were going to do it upright. They were going to do it with LSD and with amplified music. And of course, with amplified music, now you're into EMI, the British, company that actually developed this technology, which was part of MI6. And now then the power of music to produce trance so that people could be seduced into do what thou wiltst was tremendously amplified. So that's really, if you look at the electronics and the drugs, they had simply taken these concepts that they had been working on in the 1920s and had given some technology to them to make them much more powerful and more able to destroy people's ability to think clearly.
Right. So essentially what we're looking at here in Woodstock is the genesis of this huge Crowleyan satanic occult mind control system that the CIA and all of these occultists have been, promoting for the last 100 and
forever. I guess, for a long time. And the organization, was in existence in the first century, and
right.
And so
you mean in the 19th century?
I mean in the first century. The tectons.
Okay.
Are basically the origin of the Freemasons. The tectons are mentioned in the Gospel and in Josephus. The word means builder, or it's oftentimes mistranslated as carpenter, but it's the word that in modern Greek is simply given to the Freemasons, right? So what you're dealing with is a very old organization that is very determined to control people and has slithered into financial and political power. And so now it's able to basically keep the masses in a...
Yeah, you might want to get close to your mic there, Joe.
It's able to keep the masses in a debased form because it's developed this technology to be able to dumb us down. Now bear in mind, when you look at Woodstock, okay, you have to then think of how all of these destructive elements then are made more sophisticated, how the music becomes more sophisticated, how the drugs become more sophisticated. If you look at the psychotropic drugs that the college students are just epidemically taking right now, all the meds, the so-called meds, the tranquilizers and the stimulants, so many of them have their origin in the research into psychotropic drugs that LSD supposedly comes from.
Right.
So you really
serotonin and all of
that stuff, all the serotonin uptake drugs. Look, I mean, I just want to give this warning to everyone who's listening. Do not take any of these drugs. You do not have. They give them to people on the idea that they're having mental problems, and of course, everyone's having mental problems.
Well, what they really do is they cause hypersuggestion.
Exactly.
And I recommend people read my article in Theogens, What's in a Name, because in that article I break down the whole remarketing of these substances and how they...
That article is very important. And then I would also mention that, look, if you're having emotional problems, if you're not able to think clearly, if you're struggling with life, the first thing you want to look at is the toxicity, the physical toxicity that you're taking in. The two things that people need to do before they ever put a med in their body are look at the kind of food they're eating and look at what kind of chemicals they're putting in their body. And then the other thing is they need to train themselves in logic. They need to work on their ability to think rationally. They have the Trivium method, which is available as a. I would recommend if you're as an adult, the first thing you want to do is simply study the fallacies.
Right. And yeah, that's a great place to start. But people can go to my other website, which is triviumeducation.com, and we keep everything free from there. And please, we do ask that you donate to support the website, support all the work. New York's not cheap. I got a couple donations today, people offering to help out for the expense for this trip. I am going to need to make another trip out here as soon as possible. So, any and all donations is extremely appreciated. Hopefully, I haven't lost my connection.
No, you're good. Yeah,
okay.
So the thing is that, there's malfeasance. It's organized. It's highly technical. It's in psychiatry. It's in the drugs they're giving us. It's in the food we're taking. I mean, I know this sounds paranoid, but I'm telling you, if you go through the research papers that Jan and I have produced, you'll see that there is just overwhelming evidence. The common person is being constantly debased, constantly. They've got culture arranged against us everywhere. Woodstock is just a moment in time where it just became vivid enough that it can be easily seen by a person once you understand Woodstock in the right context, that this is a cultural weapon, that music is weaponized, that the drugs are weaponized, that the rock idols are weaponized. I mean, that this is all taking you to a bad place. And when Jan and I expose the origins of the Woodstock Festival in Crowley's Do What Thou Wilt'st proclamation, I mean, that's a connection that hasn't been made before. And now that it has been made, this should really help people start looking at Woodstock in a different way. It's part of the MK Ultra technology that was developed to basically debase culture. And so we can now show all the way through from the Hellfire Club to the art colony in Woodstock, onto MK Ultra, into the Woodstock rock concert in '69, and then on to the meds. I mean, folks, we really need to support one another to become more mentally powerful. That means we've got to stop eating the poison and start training ourselves against the fallacies and sophistry.
Yeah, that's for sure. And you know, I've got to reiterate again, and I've said this hundreds of times, but mysticism is the tool of tyrants, and they get you caught up in magical thinking to prevent you from critical thinking. And they'll tell you that critical thinking is bad, or that it's wrong, or serves no purpose. And this is all designed to get people to not trust themselves, to destroy their self-esteem, to get them to follow what other people tell them, and to not even bother looking for the citations and facts. And so this is how something like Woodstock gets paraded around for a half a century as some great event without being exposed for what it is, simply because people don't take the time to, dig through the citations and look things up. It's not like, I'm anything special or Joe's anything special. It's just that, if I'm going to study Woodstock, well, I better go take a trip to Woodstock. If I'm going to talk about the Princeton Radio Research Project, well, I need to go to Princeton. And, you got to use some basic common sense and trust those senses, your five senses, to bring you information, and use the trivia method, learn the fallacies so that you can filter the information. Understand that when you see a contradiction, you don't throw up your hands and say opinions are like assholes. That should be a sign that you need to dig further down into the information until there are no more contradictions, and until you can figure out which one is the lie or the error.
Right.
And then you can understand the information and explain to others how you reached a conclusion clearly and concisely. And the information. It doesn't even matter the onslaught of idiots that might attack you for it.
Right. I mean, I'll just give an example. No one who has any training in logic, and no one who has also been exposed to the information about the malfeasance of the government that produced MKUltra would ever look at A Course in Miracles, right, with its channeling of Jesus Christ into a Jewish technical psychologist, a cognitive psychologist who is an employee of MKUltra.
Helen Schuckman.
Right. I mean, if you look
here's the irony, Joe. We actually told this story to one of the owners of one of the New Age bookstores in Woodstock, and you could see his head just about to just explode. I mean, the guy just went on complete overload when we told him that Helen Schuckman and William Thetford were MKUltra working for the CIA, and there was CIA MKUltra subproject 69 and 89.
Right. I mean, it's tragic, but there are the oligarchs are clever. They don't often leave evidence, but from time to time they do. I mean, when you have Gordon Wasson's pay requisition for Subtropic 58, where he supposedly discovers the magic mushroom, when you get the letters where Gregory Bateson talks about how an inferior population can be enslaved by a superior population, and then when you find out that Schuckman worked for MKUltra, well, these are facts which have no explanation in any other thesis than there is an organized technical malfeasance in the government. Once you have that, then you can resist. And then you, of course, it's a paranoid world, because you have to always be thinking about, well, what is exactly going on right now that's hurting me? But this is the only way.
What was that? Who was it that said, we have a republic if we can keep it? So
Benjamin Franklin, when he was leaving the.
And he was corrupt too.
Well, he was totally corrupt. But he was actually.
Yeah, and I think we have.
That was an ironic.
I think we have only a couple seconds left.
Okay. Well, anyway, I'm Joe Atwill, author of Caesar's Messiah, Shakespeare's Secret Messiah. Read those books. They're very useful to get a platform to understand where we are culturally. And that's Jan Irvin. He is the author of a number of books and has a website, Gnostic Media, where you should go. There's a donate button, and support Jan. And also support the network that produces this show.
Support CCN.
CCN, because believe me, the media is a weapon, and this network is one of the steps we can take to...
Who else put this show out and gave you this information? So think about that, and please donate, support. We need some angel donators, so thanks for your support. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you for tuning into CCN. This unique network is dedicated to free and independent media. CCN was created with the belief that information is the common heritage of all beings, which is why our live stream high-definition broadcast is easily accessible and free to view. If we want to change the world, we must first change the media. Having produced over 1,000 shows in 2015, which are all archived on YouTube, we look forward to bringing you more groundbreaking, cutting-edge information in 2016. For more information on what is on, please check out our broadcast guide for weekly updates. CCN broadcasts in multiple languages and features some key voices of our challenging times who are all in pursuit of a free, fair, just, sustainable world. CCN belongs to you, the people, and it is up to you all to keep this network on the air. Please contribute to the Network Support Fund or visit the CCN shop. We thank you all for supporting free and independent media.